Good morning, everyone. I have 9:30, so we will get started. I'm Beth McCall. I am the new chairman of the coalition for 2021. I want to wish everyone a very happy new year and hoping that 2021 will be a year of health and revitalization for all of us. If Carl is on the call, Carl, I would ask everybody to please stay muted to help with the sound. And Carl, if you would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, I'd be happy to, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. And here we go, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Carl, very much. Very appropriate today, so thank you for leading us in that pledge. As I said, if you will put, I think it's easier to take roll if you will put your names in the chat box and the district that you are in. And if I would like to introduce you to Elena Martinez Lopez. Elena will be our assistant during my term with the coalition. So Elena, if you can please put the minutes from the December 3rd meeting up, and I will let everybody read over them and then take a motion to approve.
Hang on a second.
Okay, Elena, are you having difficulty? Okay, we'll go ahead and we will come back to that because I want to have plenty of time today for our guest speaker. One of the things that I would like for you to do, and we've had a couple of ideas already on speakers that you would like to hear during the coalition meetings. So if you can email those to me, I would greatly appreciate that, and we will be working on all of those programs for the year. So if you have suggestions. Also, one of the things I'd like to do is beginning in February, we would like to begin to highlight some really great things that are going on in your district. So we will have a district highlight for about 10 minutes of the meeting. So if you have something really special going on that you would like to share with us, please also email that to me, and we will certainly get you on our agenda. At this time, I am the balance in our checking account is exactly the same because we haven't had any live meetings. So the balance is $1,560.86. We will be talking a little bit about membership fees a little bit later down the road, but as long as we stay virtual, most of the funds that we use go towards the food. So as long as we stay virtual, we will maintain that balance and talk about membership fees at a little bit later date. So without further ado, because I want to give Jacob plenty of time to give us an update on the DOE session will start in March. And then leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand, then we will be sure to call on you, or you can put your question in the chat and we will take them from the chat. So without further ado, he really doesn't need any introduction. We all know him, but please let me welcome Jacob Oliva, who is the Chancellor for K-12 Education. And Jacob, we welcome you. And Elena, I would just ask that you take down the agenda so we have a full screen. And Jacob, good morning, and thank you for meeting with us for our first meeting of the Coalition in 2021.
Well, Beth, thank you for the opportunity, and I guess congratulations on your new appointment as the chair, or condolences. I'm not sure which way that goes, but
thank you.
Somebody's got to keep everybody on track and organized. So it's great to be on this call. It's kind of funny because people are already texting me, and most of you know, when I was in a school district, I was from Flagler County, which is the Central Florida area. And I'm not probably supposed to have favorite parts of the state, but Central Florida is where I still currently live. Even though I work in Tallahassee, my kids go to school and we live in Central Florida. So I have a soft spot anytime it comes to the I-4 corridor, because we drive that very, very much often, just like many of you. So a chance to spend some time with some of my favorite people in their backyard is something that I look forward to. And I know, Beth, you said for people to put questions in the chats, but my phone is getting texted a million things at the same time. So I think there's one more other way to say, but I am grateful for the text that said COVID is making me look younger. So that's my favorite message from this morning so far. So without further ado, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, what I'm hoping is to just kind of give an update on some of the major things that is happening across the state, and then leave plenty of room for questions and answers. If that works for you, Beth, I think that'll work for everybody on the call.
Absolutely, works great.
So there's 2 hands up already. Should we start with those, or do you want me to just kind of get into some dialogue? Or I think those hands came up when you were doing your intro.
Well, let me see if these questions are about for you or not. And okay. I can't tell who they're from. Elena, you have one.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who the second one is.
Superintendent Pace from Osceola's hand up.
Dr. Pace, do you have a question?
I apologize. That was a mistake on my part. No questions. Good morning.
Okay.
I'm going to say that was a high five, a virtual high five. How about that? So,
I think even though we've been doing this virtual for a while, we're all still learning.
So it's funny you say that, because we've all had to learn new ways of work, right? And this is what being in part of in education is, that we're going to continue to grow and learn how to make ourselves better. And it was interesting. I saw a thing online that says, like, people set their yearly goals. It said, in 2019, I'm going to stay away from negative people. And then in 2020, I'm going to stay away from positive people. And then it's like you get to 2021, and my New Year's resolution for 2021 is to hopefully never have to say to somebody, I think you're still on mute, as you're moving forward through these meetings. That's like my own personal goal, but we'll see how that goes moving forward. So first, I want to congratulate everybody on this call. I think if we were to kind of just reflect back in history or in time a little bit, where we were, believe it or not, coming up on almost a year ago. And when I think of the year of 2020, I probably echo many of the feelings of everyone on this call, that just seemed like a giant blur. And next thing you know, it was Christmas, and it's like, what just happened? We're in 21 already, and everything's just been moving so fast. And the challenges that we've faced have not been short. And when we look at where we were in March, when navigating through the pandemic and trying to understand what is that impact going to mean for us personally, professionally, and moving forward, most of us remember those times, and some of the superintendents remember when we were on the calls, and we were right around spring break time last March, when we were trying to make some major decisions as a state on what are we going to do, and we asked everybody to extend spring break. and to pivot basically the way we stayed connected with students and engaged with teaching and learning almost overnight. In fact, we asked districts to develop and submit instructional continuity plans on how they can make that happen. And I believe all of us were very optimistic that, okay, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a better understanding. Everything's going to go away. And by the end of May, maybe the beginning of June, or at some point, we're going to come off of spring break and get our students back into our classrooms and continue and resume life as we know it. Well, we all know that 2 weeks turn into 4 weeks turn into 8. And the next thing you know, we were trying to figure out how to stay connected with students for the remainder of a school year while closing it out. And anytime that I get a chance to publicly thank and recognize the work that's gone forth through our elected officials, through our superintendents, our district leaders, our teachers, our principals, the way we were so creative and innovative in making that happen, Florida has been a leader. And in fact, we get calls at the state often and frequently about how did you do what you were able to do, and then make sure that you can maintain some high levels of connections with our students. And we were able to do that. And I know it wasn't perfect. I know it wasn't seamless. And we still identified challenges, and we still have challenges. I mean, access to devices and internet is still a challenge in many of our communities. There are some definite islands out there. And if there's anything that, lessons learned is that creating equity through access lens to distance learning has been a challenge that districts have had to be innovative and creative in overcoming and mitigating those challenges. So moving forward, as we look back at the fall, everybody remembers that we developed our school reopening plans, and we got every district throughout the state of Florida, and every school was able to meet the assurances within the emergency order 06 to make sure that we had choice opportunities for our family that included face-to-face instruction, a hybrid possibility, and a remote full virtual learning. And that hybrid area we called maybe that innovative learning space. We let districts who knew their schools and their districts the best to develop and submit those plans, and getting those plans approved guaranteed some access to maintain FTE counts and provide instructional minute flexibility that we definitely very much heard from school districts was a priority and something that was greatly needed. As we were able to reopen schools, and it was not easy, but it was a monumental lift, and we were able to achieve that very well. And as I've stated earlier, Florida continues to lead the nation with distance learning and staying connected with students. We were able to do that. And then the biggest thing that came up is, well, what about the second semester? So we're really grateful that Commissioner Corcoran, with the support of the governor's office and even the legislature and everybody involved, was able to sign Emergency Order 07, which is our spring reopening plans, which kind of gets us to where we are as a state right now. To date, every district, I know we have 67 county school districts, but there's 74 total LEAs that'll be submitting reopening plans when you add in the lab school and the virtual school and the school for the deaf and blind and all the other factors. Everybody has submitted a spring reopening plan, and we are in full receipt of all the plans to date. There is about 18 plans that had not been fully yet approved, but we are very optimistic that we will get those approved within the next couple of days. So if you are in a district where you still haven't heard whether or not your spring reopening plan has been fully approved, let me know, and I can follow up with you today, because our hope is to get those done before our state board meeting, which we have one scheduled on Wednesday. And we're confident we're going to be able to get everybody there and make sure that we're providing high quality learning environments for our students as we navigate through the rest of the school year. As I kind of stated, we have a state board meeting this Wednesday, which is in Central Florida area. We're really grateful to Daytona State College right there in Volusia. I think I saw Carl and Ruben and some other folks from the Volusia area will be at Daytona State College this Wednesday, and we'll be providing an update to the board on where we are with spring reopening plans. as well as an update on our strategic plan, which guides a lot of our metrics moving forward. But another item that we're really working hard with districts that may impact many of the folks on the call is an update on where we are with the locally approved and implementation of the teacher salary instructional allocation. If everybody remembers, we were really grateful that Governor DeSantis really highlighted the elevating and recognition and celebrating of teachers, and was able to work with the legislature to get about a $500 million appropriation to increase teacher salary pay. To date, there's about 19 districts that have not fully locally come to terms with the development of that teacher salary increase. In fact, we have 8 districts that are at impasse around the teacher salary increase, and we have 11 districts that are still going through the negotiating process locally. So our hope, we're going to provide an update to the board on where we were. If you remember, those were due to the state to be submitted by October 1st, but a lot of districts weren't able to meet that deadline for various reasons, and we were able to extend that compassion and grace and flexibility and get most up-to-date information. There are some districts that may be on this call who have reached tentative agreements, but they're still awaiting ratification, or they're still getting it in front of the board for final approval. So we feel like getting all those teacher salary allocation pay schedules submitted and implemented in the near future will definitely happen. So thank you for your efforts and works leading up to that. And as I stated, if you're at a place where you need to give us an update or have questions about where you are with payments or and any concerns that you may have around the implementation of your teacher salary plans, feel free to reach out to me, because we are providing an update to the state board on where we are this Wednesday, kind of as a state of the state. A couple other big bucket items that are still moving forward that we don't want to fall off of everybody's radar is where are we with standards implementation? If you remember last year, the state board fully adopted for English language arts and math our benchmarks for excellent student thinking, and we've established timelines for moving those standards forward into our classroom that aligns with instructional material bids, and making sure that when we do go for implementation of standards in the classroom, we're able to provide associated professional development as well as high quality curriculum aligned primary instructional tools, also known as textbooks, to give the teachers the resources they need so they can implement the standards with fidelity. So that work is still moving forward. And even with that work, a lot of questions we always get is, with the new standards, are we going to get newly aligned textbooks? And then are we going to have newly aligned assessments that are going to align with those standards and expectations? Because those standards really outline what we expect students to know and learn at each and every grade level. So the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. And that work, even though some of it had to pivot to more of a virtual learning environment, but the test writing teams, which include a lot of people in this call because there's experts throughout the state. So many of the districts on this call have volunteered their district staff, teachers, department chairs. We are so grateful for the leniency and the flexibility you have shared with us so that this work can keep moving forward. Those teams are writing the test item specifications, and that work is moving forward. And simultaneously, we're also moving through the instructional materials adoption process. So we currently have out our English language arts instructional materials bid. We've received, it was either 9 or 12 different textbook publishers have responded to the bid. So we're really excited about the work that we're seeing. And in fact, it's your teachers and leaders in your districts that are doing the instructional materials reviews for us. So we're grateful that you're able to share those valuable resources. And that timeline is moving forward so that you'll be able to adopt those materials probably this summer to be able to purchase to get in your classroom. So that work is ongoing, as well as scheduling professional development to make sure that people understand what our benchmarks for excellent student thinking looks like and should be, and how it should be implemented in the classrooms. Simultaneously, as we're moving forward with the ELA and math bid, House Bill 807 last year asked the department to do a review of our civic standards. And in fact, that review report was due to the legislature and the governor by December 31st. So that has been finalized and formally submitted. In that report, the work groups that consisted of Florida teachers and leaders and experts again had identified about 4 different themes that they think if we develop strategies around addressing those 4 themes, we can make our standards in civics education a little bit stronger, as well as include some Holocaust standards, because we've been tasked with writing standards for Holocaust across K-12. So those work groups have been established, and they're going to be Florida teachers and Florida leaders and Florida professors and Florida experts to look at how we can create Florida standards and expectations to improve our current civics and Holocaust standards. So those work groups are starting to meet now. They started this month to look at ways that we can make our standards a little stronger. And we've established a timeline that when we write new standards to reflect those themes, we'll be able to take those to the state board in time to meet a future social studies textbook adoption, because we don't want to buy textbooks and then change the standards. So we're very cognizant of the textbook cycle process. As we're finishing ELA, our math textbook bid's about to go out publicly and move forward, and then following that is a social studies bid. So we're working really diligently to make sure that we are fully aligned with curriculum, instruction, and assessments, which unfortunately for the state of Florida, when we moved from Common Core to Florida standards, we've been a little bit misaligned, where we've had different textbooks in our classrooms that may not reflect the current standards that have been approved by the state board, which may not be 100% reflected in our assessments. So this vision doesn't happen overnight. It takes multiple years to move forward. So I'm going to pause there because I've seen a couple of hands go up, and the first one I saw go up was Abby Sanchez.
Abby Sanchez, correct. Abby?
Hi, thank you so much for being here and sharing everything with us. One of the questions I had, I know that we were looking at the ELA and the math and updating the standards and textbooks and so on and so forth, and civics as well. What about other social studies? For example, elementary, the social studies book has not been renewed or updated since 2001, since President Clinton was in office. And it's missing so much information, and our teachers are struggling trying to piece together as much information as possible to update everything.
So great question. So the social studies textbook, I'm going to get my years wrong. I have to pause to get my years right. So we're in 21. So at the end of 21, the math bid is going to go out for review to be adopted for 22. And then in 22, the social studies textbook will be up for review. It takes about a year to put the call for bid, to have the textbook companies write textbooks, for us to receive the bid, review the materials. It's about a year till you actually see it in the classroom. So math will go out at, I'm going to say November-ish, give or take, of 21. And then social studies will be in 22, which is why we want to get the civics work and the standards updated in social studies now to the state board so that we can get that done in time for the instructional materials bid.
Super, thank you so much.
Sure. Dr. Jenkins, it's good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Jacob. Happy New Year to you.
Likewise.
And you do look great. I don't think it's related to COVID, though. I don't want to say that, but you do look good. Good to see you. So a question around the adoption. I know I sent you our chart from Orange County, and some other superintendents have been expressing concern as well, because it looks like dollar-wise, 2021, we're around 19 million. We got about 17 million for instructional materials from the state. Next year is a juggernaut to the tune, my staff has estimated, about 63 million. So I'm wondering if we're going to see some backing down of those projected adoptions for 21-22, or if we're going to see significant increases in our instructional materials dollars. I sent you our chart, so I'm wondering what you've been able to find.
And thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And just for the background of everybody on the call, as most of you know, especially as due diligent board members, when you read those purchase orders and funding acquisitions, and it gets time to purchase textbooks, you probably, your heart probably skips a beat, because it's a very serious investment. It's probably one of the biggest investments outside of people and who we put in front of our classrooms that we make as school districts to support learning. And as Dr. Jenkins has alluded, the projected prices for the ELA books are more than historically. And I don't know if that's a product of the times or the work that went into produce those materials. So that Dr. Jenkins gave us some very, very helpful information of what they felt like the shortfall in the categorical for instruction materials. As part of our finance formula is a categorical for instructional materials to be able to fully adopt and implement a K-12 purchase is significantly short. So that information's given us some valuable tools that we've used at the department to talk about, does this impact a future funding request, a legislative budget request? Do we go to the legislature? How do we navigate through that? One of the things that we're still currently reviewing, and I'm sure I'm going to get questions on CARES 2, or I believe it's called CARES. I think it's CARES or something like that. CARES, the next wave is, what does that funding look like? As most of you are aware, the national legislature has passed some legislation to increase some CARES dollars moving forward through the second half of the school year. We're in receipt of a lot of data and information that we're currently navigating through, and hope to be able to do a topical webinar on what is the next step for CARES moving forward. But part of our hope, Dr. Jenkins, is that with some additional CARES dollars, we want to make sure there's flexibility to buy and purchase those things. So there may be an avenue in additional funding from that possible area. So I think it's something that we recognize, and we're just trying to collectively still have to strategize around.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I'm wondering if a fallback plan might be to adjust the timeline for the actual adoption and the purchase. If the money doesn't come through, will the department consider moving that timeline and adjusting it slightly, Chancellor?
Yeah. So I think that's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that now, but I can tell you, in my experience with Commissioner Corcoran, he's been very student focused and very understanding, and he likes data. And when moving forward with making those decisions, we're going to present him with as many options that we can and make the right decisions accordingly.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Of course. So let's go kind of back. So I wanted to provide an overview of kind of where we are as a state of the state. We talked about our standards, our teacher salary. As most of you are also aware, this week, in fact, today kicks off interim committee weeks in the Florida legislature. So there are some education committees meeting this week, I believe, in the Senate and the House. So as you're navigating through your local delegations and your locally developed legislative platforms, just know that committee weeks are starting, and we want to make sure that we start monitoring. I want to say, to date, I don't have the exact number, but if I had to make an estimate, we've had about 30 education bills already filed that we're doing full bill analyses on. A lot of the bills do look a little similar to bills that have been filed in previous years, but then there's some new stuff. So if that's not been on your radar, just make sure that you're aware of that, because that work is starting to move forward. And we want to make sure that we stay collaboratively in nature, looking forward at future possible policy that's going to impact the great students here in the state of Florida. So with that, Beth, those were kind of the 5 just big buckets I wanted to build background knowledge on. Good teachers build background knowledge and activate thinking. And then I'm going to pause to see if there's any other topics or questions or comments that we'd like to discuss so that we can be good stewards of everybody's time.
We have a question from Teresa Jacobs. Teresa?
Oh boy, I'm looking forward to the day when we don't say you're on mute also.
Yeah, exactly. That's my goal here. Darn
it. Chancellor, thank you so much for this opportunity to hear from you and to field some questions from us. One question I have for you, this is not new. You know, school districts across the state have urged the governor to consider allowing our teachers to be expedited in terms of access to the vaccination. I wanted to know from you, one of the approaches that we in Orange County Public Schools will probably be asking the governor to consider is at least allowing those most vulnerable teachers that are of an advanced age, whether that be 55 or 50 or 60, whatever threshold level data with support, and teachers that have one or more underlying conditions that are particularly vulnerable, but are required to be back in the classroom because of the increased number of students that are returning. We know it's good news that students are returning, but we also are looking at a new strain of the virus that we know is at least someplace in the state of Florida that likely puts our teachers at greater risk and certainly puts them at much greater fear. And so out of concern for our teachers' welfare, as well as making sure that we have adequate experienced teachers in the classroom, we'd really like to see some leniency from the governor in allowing a process to evaluate those teachers and expediting them and putting them in the current cohort. Your thoughts on the probability of that success?
Great question. So I'm going to be careful on how I answer because I'm not the Surgeon General and I don't work for the Department of Health, and vaccinations are very clearly under their purview. But what I would say from what I've seen kind of across the state is that there's a prioritization for vulnerable populations and senior citizens that would include teachers. And there are other districts who are working with their Department of Health to make sure those teachers meet that prioritization list and are able to get access to those vaccinations. So the folks that have been identified as the most vulnerable could also be teachers, and that shouldn't exclude them from being into that prioritization list. So my response to that would be to encourage you to talk to your local Department of Health to see how we make sure that teachers that qualify as an identified prioritization are getting access.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If I could follow up, Chancellor, so do you mind telling us what districts where their local health department has actually
Hillsborough County I talked to Hillsborough County last week, and they got 100 vaccinations set aside for their vulnerable teachers.
That's helpful. Thank you.
But that wasn't from my doing. I want to be clear. That was something that the district worked out with the Department of Health. I don't have any oversight of that or influence. I just want to be careful what I publicly state.
I got it. I just needed to know who to access because our local Florida Department of Health said they had no direction on that. So I'd like to be able to point them to Hillsborough. That's helpful.
Yeah, and I would suggest Dr. Jenkins reaching out to Superintendent Davis to see how that conversation developed. I want to be very clear that was something that happened between their local Department of Health and the superintendent, and they were able to facilitate that.
How many vaccines did you say they secured?
This is what Superintendent Davis told me, that he was working with the Department of Health to get about 100, and they were for teachers that qualified as at risk or vulnerable populations of age. But that was what he told me. Now, whether or not that happened, I can't answer that. But he told me that that's something that they were working on.
I'll call him. Thanks.
Misty Belford.
Good morning, Chancellor Oliva. Just two really kind of follow-up questions, just to clarify on a couple of the things that you mentioned earlier. One is on the potential use of the new CARES funding. Are you suggesting that you are requesting flexibility for the state to allocate dollars for categorical for textbooks, or are you suggesting flexibility for the districts to allocate from the dollars they receive for CARES funding toward textbooks?
Right. So suggesting is an interesting term. What I'm saying is there may be an opportunity that when you get your CARES allocation locally, as you're developing a plan on how to utilize those funds, investing in COVID-related expenses like getting high-quality materials for students to look at remediation and closing achievement gaps and providing resources may be an opportunity for to use some of those dollars to offset those expenses.
Super, thank you for that clarification. And then one more clarifying question on the vaccines. We were blessed in Brevard County as well. Dr. Jenkins, I sent you a note. You may want to speak with Dr. Mullins as well. We were blessed to be able to work with our health department to get some of our 65 and older staff members in for vaccines as well. But one of the things that we've been speaking about at the state level is once we clear the 65 plus and we're moving into, additional healthcare workers and first responders, there's been a big push for teachers to be included in that level as opposed to only allowing 65 plus teachers. Are you seeing any movement on that discussion at the state level?
So thank you, Misty, and thank you for sharing the connections you're able to facilitate in Brevard, because I hadn't heard that either. So I hope Dr. Mullins is okay if I have him get inundated with phone calls as well, just like we just did with Superintendent Davis. They'll get over it. I think your question is a good question. And obviously there's a high prioritization on vulnerable populations. And then when you look at kind of that next class, and we'll just say that working class of people to be prioritized, are teachers going to be a part of that? I don't know if that's been defined or determined, but I think that's where we're still continuing to have that dialogue. And the efforts and requests that have been submitted by districts have been received. So moving forward, we'll have to stay pretty closely connected, but that's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions being asked at this time. Chancellor, we want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. We know that this week is going to be a busy week with the start of committees. And I want to thank you for always being available. You always take a phone call. You always reply to an email. So that doesn't always happen. So we want to thank you for being so available for all of us. So thank you.
Of course, and hopefully this isn't the last time we meet. I want everybody to know that we really do appreciate and understand the decisions that you have to make each and every single day, and a lot of times it's not easy, and we know that the work we do is of value and of great importance. And if there's anything we can do to support you in your efforts, we're here. And we may not always have the answers you want to hear, but just know that we want to be a partner in continuing the great work we're seeing across the state.
Thank you. And I see that Sarah Fortney has a question. So Sarah.
Thank you. I put mine in the chat, and I appreciate you being here, Chancellor. If you could look over that. My camera is not working. I apologize.
Okay, hold on.
It's in the chat.
Okay, hold on. I will get it. With the inconsistent instruction, attendance, COVID, and substitute shortages for 2021, why not do the right thing and cancel FSA school grades and put that time and money into the increased need of social mental services for our kids? So that's her first question.
So, and thank you for that question. And if we look back at last year during the spring, when the decision was made to kind of sunset the accountability system, there was a couple big pieces that happened. One, Florida had to request a waiver from our federal guidelines that we have to meet as a state through the Every Student Succeeds Act, our ESSA requirements. And we were given that flexibility at the national level. And then two, there was some Florida statutorily waivers that needed to happen, and we were able to get that through executive and emergency orders. So moving forward with this spring in this year's accountability system, some of those waivers around the Florida statutes and rules have not yet been waived. And I do feel like Commissioner Corcoran, as well as most of the folks across the state, see the value in giving that the administration of our assessments, whether it's our end of course exams or our grade level assessments, the Florida Standards assessments, because that data is very important to schools and school districts and teachers when looking at identifying learning loss and mitigating that learning loss. Now, we have been able to, as a state, put together some very robust formative assessments across the state, where every district maybe has a purchased assessment or locally developed formative assessments to try to navigate where students are, whether or not they're performing at or above grade level or need additional assistance or remediation. But that's not the level of data that we would receive from the implementation of a standard assessment. And I think that most people feel that there is value in giving that assessment, because 2 years in a row without that data could be even more detrimental to student learning loss. I think there are still and will continue to be some conversations around what do we use the data from those assessments for, as far as how does that impact school grades, how does that impact BAM, how does that impact placement. I don't think those decisions have been made. I think the commissioner's still very open and receptive to different ideas. I know he's leaned on a lot of the superintendents across the state to hear from them and what they would like to know or learn. I think the answer to that question has not yet been determined, and it's something that we'd have to stay closely together on and monitor. But moving forward, I think the consensus is that there is value in making sure students are assessed through a standardized summative process.
I appreciate your answer, and I respectfully, as a classroom teacher now retired, disagree. But I agree to disagree. So thank you.
And I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I'll say, as a parent, I want my kids to be assessed because I want to make sure my kids are learning too. So I think that's just part of the public debate.
Right. And then my second question, please. Thank you.
Her second question is, what percentage of COVID positivity rate in a school would justify moving to e-learning for the safety of staff and students?
So that's another great question. And I don't know if the answer to that question is specifically set on a particular number or a percentage for positivity rate. Whether or not a school needed to shift or to distance learning has definitely happened throughout the state of Florida. And the decisions that went into making that was varied. In fact, Dr. Jenkins may be able to best answer that question because she's had to deal with that a couple times here in Orange County. But the answer to that is really is a conversation with your local Department of Health, and each and every single time that decision was made was based on dialogue and conversations for how to best mitigate spread and exposure at the local level. I don't think it really hindered on a percentage number of positivity, but more of a conversation around, can we properly staff this school and keep students socially distanced when looking at typically what happens when those decisions are made is due to large numbers of contact tracing. It may not actually be a percentage of students or adults that tested positive, but because a couple students or adults tested positive through contact tracing, it may impact hundreds of other people, which greatly disrupts the ability for the school to operate or function in a safe and efficient manner. And those decisions typically, from what I've been informed with or the conversations I've been engaged with, were more around that aspect, not necessarily a percentage rate. I don't know if that is a fair answer.
Again, thank you for your answer.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Chancellor, for taking time out of your very busy schedule. We will ask you to come back, possibly after session, to join us again with just what went on during session and how it will affect us. So again, thank you so very much for joining us today. And with that said, I would like to remind everybody, although our agenda says we'll meet through April virtually, we will meet through May virtually, and I'm hopeful that we will have a June conference, not sure if we will or not, and that we can have our breakfast in June, but we will definitely meet virtually through May. And our time from the survey that we sent out, we will be meeting at 9 o'clock from now on instead of 9:30. The survey suggested that 9 o'clock was a good time. So your next meeting will be at 9 o'clock. Elena will be sending that memo out. If you have not signed into the chat so that we can take your attendance, please do that. Is there anything else for the good of the order today? Carl, do you have anything for us?
Madam Chair, I thought it was great just having the Chancellor here, as it always is. But I also want to further what you mentioned when the meeting started, and that was to invite everyone to let us know what they think would be some good topics for us to have during these next 3 or 4 months that we have during this school year. Because what we would really like to see is perhaps we will get into the posture of every month, perhaps one district will be in charge of that meeting's or presentation, and we can kind of keep this flowing around the Central Florida School District. So keep it in mind, and because we are all ears and we want to have meetings that are interesting in serving the needs of our members. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Carl, very much. And he is exactly right. We want our meetings to be informative. I do not believe that you meet just to meet. We want informative meetings. So thank you so much. So with that in mind, we are not quite at an hour, which is good for me. Our next meeting date will be February the 9th will be our next meeting date, and we will be sending out the agenda at some point. So thank you. Please stay safe. And I look forward to seeing all of you in February.
I have a quick question.
Bye-bye.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Beth?
Yes.
I had a real quick question about controlled open enrollment and everything from April to May. How are you all doing the data for that, for controlled open enrollment? And how can we share the data between all of us?
Does anyone have an answer for that?
Not quite sure I heard.
So I just want to see how the districts can share that controlled open enrollment data and see where our children are going and be able to make sure that we're able to track all of that. And so I think, Dr. Jenkins, do you have any suggestions with any of that? You're on mute.
So I'd like for our enrollment folks who actually, the coalition had their student enrollment leads in each district consult when we were talking about open enrollment and considerations for percentage when you are full in a particular school. I'd like to propose that same strategy that we have, and we're happy to take the lead on that. Carol McGowan, until she retires, certainly on top of those matters. I'd like to have our student enrollment folks do the same thing again.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
So Madam Chair, if maybe perhaps in the minutes or something, we can ask folks to indicate who their lead is for student enrollment, and then we'll put Carol on top of it.
Okay, Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you. So all of us find the lead for somebody for controlled open enrollment. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? If you do have speakers, I'm seeing some chats come in. You can email Elena or you can email me and we will coordinate all of that. All righty. With that, everybody have a great day and see you in February. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Blessed day.